I am Garima Sabu, and on behalf of our respected and beloved Guruji, I am going to be your host for the evening. Please bear with me. Please support me. Thank you. All right. So on behalf of Guruji, welcome all of you for today evening's cultural program. And we have along with us, obviously, Guruji, our guests, all the members, and a very special guest, our esteemed guest, Mr. Vinod Gopalakrishnan. Welcome, sir. I would like to tell you something about Mr. Vinod. So, Mr. Vinod is the son of respected Guru Gopalakrishnan and Srimati Kala Mandalam Kusum Gopalakrishnan, and is married to Bharatnatyam dancer and scholar, Dr. Sri Lata Vinod. He is an alumnus of the Sloan School of Management at the Massachusetts Institute of and a banker by profession. His personal passion, however, is in art history, and over 3 decades and more, he has accumulated a vast repository of material on world history, literature, dance, art, music, film, and theatre. He is currently working towards a PhD in museum studies and art curation, and can be reached at Vinod_Gopalakrishnan at sloan.mit.edu. Alright? So let's welcome our most special guest for today with a round of applause, please. Come on. Alright, so now I would like to say a few words about our beloved Guruji. I know, Guruji, that all of us share this sentiment when I say that these past 2 weeks have been amazing, and the memories and the knowledge and your words will stay with us forever. And we are ever grateful and thankful to you. Thank you. Please give him a big round of applause, everyone. There should be no dearth of clapping today. We are going to celebrate. Alright. So, I would now give the mic over to Mr. Vinod Gopalakrishnan for his talk on Nijinsky, which we have been waiting for since Guruji told us about it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me properly? You can. Okay, fine. So yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Guruji. For those of you who don't know, my family and Guruji's family go back years and years, decades and decades. And another similarity is my father's Guru and Venvashan's Guru are the same. So in the Indian tradition, we have something, practice known as the disciples of the same Guru are known as Guru Bhais. You know, so this is the North Indian tradition. I grew up in North India, so I'm quite familiar with that. And it was, I've been associated with Venvashan's work for more than 3 decades now. And I'm a huge admirer of his infinite capacity for the written word, for the focus and meticulous devotion that he has in terms of precision and a depth of understanding when it comes to art forms, especially the ones that he is profoundly knowledgeable on. His contribution in terms of art is tremendous, and it still continues to go on. I am quite honored that I have, been able to find a small little place and way of working with him and, making things happen. Now coming to this is a series of talks that I've been doing at Natanakairali. So the first one that I did was on Anna Pavlova and how she inspired dance in India. And those of you who don't know, she, being a Russian ballerina and the diva of her time, she played a crucial role in inspiring many Indian dancers or people who were not dancers in many cases, who went on to change the course of dance in India itself. Uday Shankar being one of them, Rukmini Devi being one of them, Madam Menaka being one of them, Louise Lightfoot in Australia, she took Indian dance to Australia. They were all inspired by Anna Pavlova at some point in their lives. So that was the first talk. The second one I talked about, if I could remember, Ragini Devi, Esther Lula Sherman, who was also American, who came to India in the 1920s, and also Louise Lightfoot, who came from Australia and studied Indian dance, exposed to Indian dance, and then helped take it to Australia. So that was the third one. And then we went on to do Crossing Cultures, which was the lives of Kalamandalam Madhavan and Michael Chekhov, the great theatre guru, who went on to inspire a lot of big actors in Europe as well as America. And most recently, a couple of months ago, the talk was on Ruth St. Dennis and Ted Shawn. So those of you who are familiar with the work of Ruth St. Dennis, who came before all these people, much before that, and her contribution also has been miraculous. In all of these, Venvashan always kept talking to me about Nijinsky. It's not a name that was unfamiliar to me because my father had told me about the legend of Nijinsky, but that's about all I knew. I knew the man was important, I knew his work was important in a historical context, but I didn't know the depth of his work in terms of, where did it all come from and what happened. But Venvashan kept telling me about the fact that I need to keep doing this, keep your focus, look at it. It's very important that we tell this story as we move along. So that's what we're doing today. Vaslav Nijinsky is not a name that is known, very well known to dancers of your age group today. You may have come across a fleeting mention of his name and all that. But we'll go through his life today and his contribution, which is, in my view, unparalleled in terms of what he was able to do in a very, very short period of time. The story I take you today through today is quite, it's explosive, but it ends in tragedy. And it's a unique story that people don't expect. It's completely unexpected, and it's a well, more than me talking. Let me take you through this. Okay. Now, so here we go. We get the signal. Okay. First, acknowledgements. We are talking about some things that happened more than 100 years ago. So, I'm grateful to all the photographers historically who spent a lot of their time and effort at a time when photography was not what we have on the iPhone. They had to carry huge things. But they managed to get across such beautiful photographs from those days, either from stage or off stage, sometimes, even candid photographs. They are very transportive when we look at a historical story in this context. So these are all the sources of those photographs, which I could put here, but without these, a story is just so much. This man was a phenomenon. He came out of nowhere. I'll tell you where he came from and all the origins and all that. But once he hit the stage, there was no looking back. He was like a meteor. That's what his story says. So the moment he hit the stage, he was a superstar. And there was no looking back, either by the organizers or his mentor, so to speak, mentor for the stage, not for the training of it. He's remembered even today for his unmatched leaps. Apparently, that's why I titled the thing Defying Gravity, because nobody, no dancer before or since has been able to replicate that in terms of his leaps. And it's so sad and quite tragic that in the end of his life, all that he remembered was his leaps, nothing else. He could not. That's why I put it here that he was unmatched leaps, expressive artistry and groundbreaking choreography. Revolutionized dance. There was a lot of opposition to what he was doing at the time. We'll go through that story. His life was marked by brilliance as well as tragedy, like I told you. Where did it all begin? It began in 1889 in Kiev, Ukraine. Ukraine's been in the news for all the wrong reasons for the last 3 years. I hope that is settled pretty quickly. So he was lucky that he was born to ballet dancers who were his parents, both his dancers, like my parents were. Although I didn't turn out to be a dancer, my sister did. This really cemented the foundations of dance in Nijinsky's mind and body. They were very good dancers and they were traveling with troops as well. So they had the discipline in them, they had the outlook towards performance, so they could fine-tune, disciples, be it students or anybody else, including their own children. So the children benefited from it. His elder brother Konstantin did not get into dance. The sister in the middle is Bronislava Nijinsky. That's her name. She also became a dancer, although she was younger than Vaslav Nijinsky. The family had Polish origins, although they were living in Russia. Ukraine was then part of Russia. So they had Polish origins, but it was very much a Russian lifestyle that they were leading. And because of their the parents' outlook towards dance and devotion to that, they prepared at least Vaslav Nijinsky and her sister to get into ballet school. So they started learning at home, and then eventually in 1900, Nijinsky in particular was admitted to the Imperial Ballet School, which was the biggest school then for dancers to train. And that became a bedrock of selection for people from the outside, companies from the outside, or directors, or they themselves would get chances to travel with other companies once they passed out. He studied under Enrico Cecchetti, who was an Italian ballet dancer. I managed to find a photograph of him, which we will see later on. He did study from many people as a student, but his extraordinary skill, when you read about him, made him stand apart. So he was quite a phenomenon even right from a very, very young age. Rise to fame is this period, 1907 to 1910. Keep your focus on the dates, because in this man's life, the dates don't go too far. They stop abruptly at some point. So this is why I call it a phenomenon, because this is a rocket that's taking off right now. So you don't expect it. The guy is very young, the man is very young. He graduates in 1907 from the Imperial School and joins the Mariinsky Theatre as a soloist. Straight away, a soloist. So you know that his quality of work is quite superior. And then he dances in all these, very iconic productions of Giselle, Swan Lake, and then Le Corsaire. All these are top-level productions that were being presented. So he was there. And this is where, his life starts to take a change. That in 1909, Sergei Diaghilev. We will talk about him a little more in detail because he played a huge role in Nijinsky's life. Initially positively and then not so. So he comes and he sees Nijinsky perform, and he is kind of, really impressed with what this young lad can do, and he takes him on to join the Ballet Russe, which is the Diaghilev company's name, and which became quite famous, world famous, and then also it laid the path for what happened later in terms of modern dance and then the travel and the professionalism and all that. He played a magnificent role in that. Serge Diaghilev. He was not a dancer. He did not... I don't know what that is. Yeah. I don't know what's happening. I have no idea. But you can hear me now. So, he did not come from an impresario family. He did not have training in dance. But he was out of this world manager as an impresario. He knew what to do. He knew he needed to find money. He needed to find sponsors. He needed to find artists. He needed to find musicians. He needed to find halls. And he developed friends right up to the level of Tsar Nicholas II, aristocratic friends. He knew whatever he did, he wanted to do at the best level, the highest level. So, if it was Paris, it had to be the opera house. Nothing else would work for him. If he needed musicians, they had to be the top musicians. Dancers had to be top. But he was also at the same time extremely controlling. He was such a perfectionist that it could get very difficult to work, because he would not compromise or anything, just the way I want to. So he dances. Nijinsky joins them, and he is quite happy to follow the rules, as it were. And he dances in Carnival and Sherazade, that's Rimsky-Korsakov, a traditional classical performer who's been petted with writing beautiful scores for productions. This is Serge Diaghilev. I just told you about his way of approach to everything that goes on. And at the beginning of the 20th century, impresario Serge Diaghilev organized tours of Russian artists abroad. So right now, we are talking about the years 1907, 1908. So the unrest in Russia is starting to happen, and there's some level of uncertainty as to what's going on, which ultimately culminates in the 1917 October Revolution. So before that, he knew that, and he probably felt that, and then he started organizing tours and performances in Paris. So that was, where he found that he could get everything together and make it work for him at an international level, people for exposure. So he could take the companies and dancers to be based in Paris, and then work out of Paris, go across Europe, and then later on to other parts of the world as well. So here in Saison Rouge, this is on the right-hand side. Chaliapin was a deep singer in terms of Western classical music, and that's a real poster from 1909 on the right. And he called it, Diaghilev called it Russian season, Saison Rouge, meaning the season of Russia. This was a performance in 1909. And Nijinsky is now part of the group, and they get very close in all aspects. So that, later on becomes an issue in both their lives, basically. So this is continuing. Nijinsky is becoming more and more popular. He's happy doing what he's doing. He's becoming popular. The productions are very well received, and things are all going well. The brilliance of Nijinsky is starting to show to the wider world beyond what Russia has been for him until now. So in 1911, Nijinsky and Tamara Karsavina, she was also a fantastic dancer. She passes away eventually in 1978. So there's some footage that I have seen her talking about, she's old, but talking about Nijinsky and how it was to partner with him on stage and experience what level of brilliance he brought in terms of involvement. So that was nice for me to listen to. I can't reproduce videos here, so I don't do that. I wish I could. So here's this Spectre of the Rose in 1911, and this is all happening in Paris. And these three photographs are all Karsavina with Nijinsky in different productions that go on. Now the Diaghilev phenomenon dominates Europe and catches attention. That photograph is a very classic photograph because it shows everybody in the Diaghilev group at that time. Dancers, musicians, decorators, designers, organizers and leaders. Everybody is there in that classic photograph. This was shot in Seville, Spain in 1916. So we're talking 100 years plus. And like I was talking about earlier, among his famous dancers of Imperial Russia in his troupe were Anna Pavlova, Karsavina, whom we talked about, Nijinsky, Viktorina Ganzer. There were many others as well. I can't put all the names here because then we'll be to talk about that. Michel Fokine was the first choreographer who was working with them. After Fokine, Nijinsky started doing the work. After Nijinsky, Leonid Messine came, and then towards the end, about 1920s, George Balanchine was also brought from Russia. He came to Paris because of Diaghilev, and he came from actually Georgia. That's why George Balanchine's name was not George Balanchine, it was Georgi Balanchinadze, as in Georgian. That was his Georgian name. Diaghilev changed his name for the stage, and then, of course, George Balanchine left Russia and then, came to Paris, then went to America, and what you see in New York City Ballet today and the branches of it everywhere was all done by George Balanchine. He's been the tree that has stemmed all this that goes on. Now here, Diaghilev had such imagination that in his productions, many of you are dancers, many of you are actors, many of you are theatre personalities in one way or the other. So you're familiar with what you call a stage. So a stage has a presence where you have props, you have your bodies that are working on the stage, and you have backgrounds that create the atmosphere that you want to create for that particular production. So here, Diaghilev was so forward-thinking that for his design of the production of the ballets that he was putting together, he said, I don't want the typical dancer saying, I want this, I want that, or the actor saying, I want this, I want that. He wanted to think a step further. So he got the best of painters and sculptors in the town because he knew everybody, and they designed the backdrops. So you'll see who are the people who designed the backdrops for these productions. Then you will know. You have Alexandre Benoit, Léon Bakst, for all these. These are great artists in their own way. In their own lives, they are very, very well-known artists. But they worked with them. And later on, you'll see Pablo Picasso also worked for them. So it was just a combination of artists on one side, musicians on one side, dancers on one side, organizers on one side. That makes you, failure is not really an option at that stage. Stars who captivated the world. Michel Fokine is on the right, and Karsavina is as Zubeda. That is also, if I remember, it is Rimsky-Korsakov as a production. This is again 1911. peak of his career, 1911 to 1914. So if he was born in 1989, and how would you see a peak of his career in 1911 to 14, and then what happens? You see where we're going now. In 1911, he was fired from the Nijinsky Theatre. Nijinsky. Why? Because he performed in Giselle without wearing the traditional dance belt. That was it. He didn't wear the belt for the performance out. That was what Nijinsky was. I don't care how good of a dancer you are, you don't follow the rules, you're out. But it worked well for him, and maybe he forgot, and maybe that was a sign for what was coming later. 1912, he gets fired from Nijinsky. 1912, he comes and becomes the principal dancer and choreographer for Ballet Russe. Just out, very young, just out. Creates his first choreography, which is the Afternoon of the Faun, which is what his photograph that you see here, that's him performing that little piece, which was also a path-breaking piece, which had his own, people going against it, and how can you do this, and and there are connotations of what the music, the performance is controversial for its erotic imagery and unconventional movement. How can you do all this? It's a different time that we were talking about, and it became quite on the one hand, yes, received quite something new and something very different from what people have known. But on the other hand, how can you do something like this? We've never seen. So he was not a person who was adverse to all this, and he said, maybe the way he approached it was, I will do what I want to do, and then you guys can get on with what you want to do. That was it. He choreographs The Rite of Spring, which is again a very, very famous production, which kind of probably brought on the movement of modern ballet or modern dance in the world as much as early as that. When The Rite of Spring, there were two, Igor Stravinsky's scores. There were two. One was The Rite of Spring, and the other one was The Firebird, 2 years apart. But when The Rite of Spring was performed, there was a riot in the audience. One group, they agreed, the other group didn't agree, and they started fighting with them and throwing things, and all kinds of drama has been recorded to have happened at that time. But it happened, and Diaghilev was not shaken or stirred. He was shouting at people, saying, "Keep quiet." And it's documented that Nijinsky, because of his choreography, he stood at the side of the wings and he started counting, because the people were making so much noise they couldn't hear the music. So he started shouting the counts so that the dancers could dance. So this is the kind of stage that was set. Now the last two, 1913 and 1914, I'll take you to the next stage, because his life changes here. Now he is really at the peak of his career. He's really doing well, extremely well, and very young. They're traveling in South America and performing across South America, Ballet Russe. Now this beautiful lady on the left is Hungarian, and she's learned ballet and all that, but she's not such a fantastic dancer. She falls in love with Nijinsky. But before she meets him, she sees his performances and all that, and she kind of really appreciates what he is and wants to meet him. And if you read the story, she really wants to meet him. So she gets herself onto the ship that is going. She's an aristocrat. She's got some money, so she can afford to do all that. And then she gets to meet him, and then he meets her. He's also young and all that. And then by the end of that tour or something, he proposes to her. And she says yes, and they get married. So there's nothing more to think, right? For Nijinsky, is like that. Yes, I want to do this, I'll do it, that's all. He gets married. And then the news goes to Diaghilev. Those days only telegram. Diaghilev hits the roof when he gets this news, and he immediately fires Nijinsky. He doesn't care about it. I told you about his personality, right? He doesn't care. He's fired. That's it. This is where Nijinsky's life starts to turn. But to all due credit, his wife Romola stays with him. She does not let go, and she stays through his life. She stays through whatever happens. Yeah, whatever happens after that, she stays all throughout. That's why I write here, Diaghilev, feeling betrayed, dismisses Nijinsky from the Belarus. He attempts to form his own company, but it doesn't work. He comes to London and tries to do something, because he's just the performer. Some people are like that, right? They can just perform. They can't put everything together. It's very important for us as theatre people or dancers or I said us basically because I studied a little bit of theatre, performed a little bit of theatre. My guru, the person I consider my guru, is Girish Karnatli for theatre. Quite a few years ago, but I knew the man very well. So here there's one thing that he tried to, Nijinsky did try to run on his own. It was not working for him. They had a kid, they had a little child by then, Kyra, that is the little baby there, who also went on. This is Nijinsky and Romola. Romola Pulski, that's his wife's name. She was a Hungarian aristocrat. And in the middle, the photograph is the photograph of their wedding, actual wedding. That's the day they sent the telegram. And that's the day they also discovered that, he did have, he had some thought processes in his head which could not be understood. And there were some signs there. Just keep in your mind this photograph of this man on the bottom right. He's a Swiss doctor. His name is Egon Bleuler. Egon Bleuler. And I'll tell you, we'll come back to his name. I told you I'll tell you about who we talked about gurus in the beginning. Who was Nijinsky's guru? Enrico Cecchetti in the middle. The man with the hat, the older man with the hat in the middle is Nijinsky's teacher at the Imperial College when he was learning. Enrico Cecchetti, this is 1916. So after Diaghilev fell out from the Belarus and Nijinsky fell out, choreography went to Michel Foucault. Right at the bottom, you see Diaghilev and another man with a hat. That is Michel Foucault, when he was very young. He was also a terrific dancer, performer. All of them are, other than Diaghilev, they were all performers as well as choreographers, directors. On the bottom, let me go from left and right. This is, on the left is Nijinsky in Petrushka. There. In the middle is Karsavina above, Karsavina and Nijinsky. On the right is Nijinsky right in the middle. The lady in the white with the hat is his wife. On Nijinsky's left is Igor Stravinsky, the musician, and in the rest of them I don't know, in that photograph. At the bottom you have Nijinsky as Petrushka. Right on the left, at the bottom, the man with his hands this way is Stravinsky without his glasses. Then you have Diaghilev and Michel Foucault. And then on the right you have Petrushka, which is Nijinsky as well as Stravinsky, who is very young in this photograph, much younger. I talked to you about Pablo Picasso being one of the a very young Picasso, to say, because he passed away in 1971, if I remember, Picasso. This is 1917, a long time ago. So this was the ballet called Parade in 1917, and the backdrop for this was done by a very young Picasso. On the right-hand side, right in the front with the dark suit jacket, that's a very young Picasso sitting there. So this was another. Diaghilev's mind was just completely, very unusual. Nijinsky tried. He knew that there was something happening to him. One was rejection. I told you that in the beginning that Diaghilev and Nijinsky were very, very close. They had a very close relationship. So there was some level of, possessiveness or whatever, which was both ways, and it was hurting him, and he was confused. So after all this happened, he was completely, did not know how to handle this thing. So about 2 years later, there was some kind of a patch-up, and then he would come back. It was agreed to dance in Ballet Rouge, which he did, or he tried. He could not. He tried, and he knew that he could not remember his lines, or he couldn't quite perform. He tried. He did try, and he danced in the Spirit of the Rose ballet for the last time, 1917. He left the stage and then moved on to Switzerland. He did try to do one more performance in Switzerland after that, and then it was a flat line. From after that, nothing at all. So these are some posters from the tour at that time in 1917 in America. These were posters from America. Meanwhile, what happened to Diaghilev? So Diaghilev had a life that was full of work and action and so much of contribution that he did. But he was doing all this, and he had many relationships with many people. That kind of contributed to many other complications as well. And he was also diabetic. So that didn't help him. Maybe the drugs at that time were not the best, whatever. And in 1928, Apollon Musicgate, the photograph here, this was the last production of Ballet Rouge with Serge Diaghilev. And by this time, it was in the late 20s, the choreographer was George Balanchine, as it says here. And after which, the next year, in 29, by which time Diaghilev's health had really gone down, and he dies in August of 1929. So between 29 and 31, we lost a couple of really big stars of Russian ballet who actually contributed to a lot in the world. One is Diaghilev, and in 1931, January, Anna Pavlova dies. Very, very young. Very, very young. She was, I think, 49 or 51, if I remember. So those two people went 2 years apart. Before I go here, many women are sitting here. All of you are familiar with Chanel, Coco Chanel, Chanel perfume. The founder, Chanel, was a big supporter of ballet, huge supporter of ballet and of Diaghilev. She was a personal friend of Diaghilev. She obviously knew Nijinsky and all these dancers personally. Diaghilev had a style of, I remind you, he had the style of living grandly, traveling grandly, and really living the life up, but also making sure that the work output was also of the same level. But he was not earning the kind of money. We were people who were supporting him. So he didn't really have those kind of savings or capital that he's amassed up that he can live off, and he didn't have any of that. So towards the end, towards 1928, when you read, it's quite sad, because this man who would wear the most expensive suits and dresses and all that, by early 1929, the cuffs of his shirts were frayed, and he didn't really know. He used to live in hotels. He had no house. And then the last production, all these, Coco Chanel played a big role in terms of financially underwriting these productions. And when he died, Coco Chanel paid for the funeral and the hotel room. Diaghilev did not have money even to pay the hotel room. And then I've been to his grave. He was buried in an island off Venice, where there's a cemetery. So he's buried there. Diaghilev is buried there. He happened to be in Venice and passed away there. So that was August, I think 8th of August 1929, I think, if I remember. So once Diaghilev is also gone, and Nijinsky really gets into a different spiral now. So 1914 to 1916. So remember, 1914 to 1918 is the First World War. So in Europe, it was a terrible time. Now he was trapped in Hungary because his wife was Hungarian. But due to his citizenship, he was Polish and Russian as well, because he was not allowed, he was interned, he was locked up. So not allowed to leave, and so people didn't know what happened. But at that time, Diaghilev actually helped him. He spoke to influential people and talked to them about how important this dancer was, and so they kind of let him out. So Diaghilev may have been angry with him, but he did all this. 1617, I told you about, he came back to Belarus, but that's where I told you he forgot his lines and he didn't know his entries and exits and all that. So he knew, and he struggles, and that was it. 1917, last public performance in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. Signs of mental illness began to emerge with erratic behavior and paranoia. So that's when it started coming up. Now, that man's photograph that I told you about, Dr. Egon Bleuler, French doctor, he is the man who coined the phrase schizophrenia. Schizophrenia as a term was coined by Dr. Egon Bleuler. Dr. Egon Bleuler took only 10 minutes to diagnose Nijinsky, to say he's acutely schizophrenic. And not much can be done he can be, helped in clinics and asylums, and that's what happened from there on. So the moment he knows this, Nijinsky has an awareness of this, that's when he tries to put down his thoughts in a journal, right in the beginning. His sister publishes it. His wife publishes it first. 1934, I think she publishes it. It makes sense. I have a copy of it. It makes sense for the first few pages, and then it does not make sense. It's very difficult to understand. And he also wrote a code of movement for notation, his own thoughts of notation, but he wrote it in a code, which was then deciphered by people. You won't imagine, in 1968, he passed away in 50, and he had lost his clarity long before that. In 1919, this is the last, his trial to dance was in 1919 in the Soweto House in Samoritz in Switzerland. And the artist Romain Rolland was also there at that little performance, and that was it. He never danced again. Final years and institutionalization, 1920s to 1930s, spends much of his life in and out of mental institutions. across Switzerland, France and Hungary. He undergoes various treatments, including insulin shock therapy. I don't know exactly what that is, but that's what he goes through. 1939, he flees to Hungary during the Second World War. But this makes it worse because he witnesses the horrors of war, and it deepens his psychological trauma. Now, 1945, he moves to England with his wife and their daughter Kyra, and he dies on April 8th in 1950. So effectively 30 years of his life was from one asylum to another asylum. So you look at the dichotomy of, where the absolute brilliance and absolute darkness at the other side. Now this is a photograph of the same Nijinsky when he is old, 3 years before his death. This is the same Nijinsky that you saw earlier. He spent about 30 years going from one asylum. He was depressed, spoke very little or nothing at all most of the time. He was diagnosed in 10 minutes. I told you all this. So on the left, this is an actual interview that was published in some magazine, not an interview, but somebody who went, the journalist who went to meet him. But the man, he had forgotten everything else except his jumps. Look at that photograph on the left. You see? Now here's another twist. Nijinsky and Ram Gopal, Indian dancer Ram Gopal. That is a photograph of Nijinsky 2 years before Nijinsky passed away. Now one good thing that Romola used to do was that although Nijinsky spent his time in the asylum, she used to look after him, and she stayed outside. But every time he wanted to, she knew that he may not be able to perform, but he would like to go see. Excuse me. He would like to go see dance. So she used to take him apparently occasionally to see things. One of those performances, by this time he was in London, and Ram Gopal was performing, and Ram Gopal was a huge fan of Nijinsky. He would come for the performances and all. So Nijinsky went for the performance. Ram Gopal met him backstage. This is a photograph, one photograph from that time. So he gives him a cup of coffee or something. Look at the poster on the right hand side. Nijinsky was such a big name that, the poster is like that. And on the same poster, you can see Ram Gopal's name as well, in small. Serge Liffard, who's also a great dancer, all small. Nijinsky is like this. Every time Nijinsky's name appears on a poster, it is like this. So you can imagine what the man was. And Ram Gopal was actually, apparently he was a very simple man. He had a repertoire that he knew, a small repertoire that he knew, but he did beautifully. And his contribution also to the gaining of popularity for Indian dance outside of India very early on. He was discovered by American dancer La Mary, who came to India and discovered him in Mysore, and then went across took him to Japan, and then went on across the world, basically, and then became a big dancer. Thank you, Apu. Thank you. Yeah, a very good friend of mine. So here Ram Gopal was very touched that he could meet Nijinsky in person. And 2 years after that, Nijinsky passes away due to kidney failure in London. He wanted to be buried in Paris, in Montmartre, where all the other artists are. So his body was taken to Paris to be buried. as I understand, and Venushan also understands, there was only one person at the funeral, Ram Gopal. So, yeah. The photographs on the left is much earlier and holds his signature himself, and that's his grave. That's his real grave. Petrushka is still there. It's a beautiful idea to whoever made I don't know who made the grave, but 8th April 1950. This is in Paris. So how do we remember Nijinsky? One of the greatest, male dancers, pioneered new forms of expression in ballet and modern dance, inspired generations of directors, dancers, choreographers and artists. And yes, his life is tragic, but it still continues to inspire, historians and art lovers. Again, another poster from another time, but look at the size of his name. Right? So, I put all this together because the one on the left is when he was living. All these are like from few years ago and even now. This is 2018 at the bottom. That one on the left is still running in Australia. These are all productions that are going on now, today. He did not dance after 1916, 1917, he did not dance. 100 years later, this is the amount of popularity the man has. You see? This is the amount of popularity. So we talked about this. Try and get a copy of his diary on the internet. You can buy it on the internet and go through that. Yeah. So that's him when he was very young, and then this is Petrushka towards the end of his life. When he he sank into the darkness, that's George Balanchine who took over the choreography of Ballet Russe, and then he took it on to America, and then he just became something else, and he changed quite a lot of the ways that people looked at modern dance itself. Phenomenal choreographer. These lines are two lines actually written by Nijinsky from his diary. Okay? Which makes sense. So he writes about Diaghilev. He thinks I have died for the art. I am more alive than ever. Which is true. But from this photograph, he was not lying, he is true. See what's going on? 100 years after Nijinsky's death, this is going on. So this statement that he made is true in his diary, right? And he says, I seek truth in a book. I don't care about the subject. So he was this precision man, he knew exactly what to do. When you get to know somebody like that, it's a very transformative experience. That's it. That's the story of the great Nijinsky. Yeah. See, it's not easy to put things like these together. Historical documentation is very big for me. So I do a lot of work on this. Those of you who are performers and dancers and looking up to your own career, try and pick up, try and understand the good and the bad in the past, because that's what you learn from. The new that you do will come from you. But there's so much of learning from the past that tends to be overlooked these days, basically because the amount of overload of information that we have from what we know as the internet, you get lost in that, right? You don't know how to use a filter to get to what is real, what it means to you and the work that you do and the road that you walk on. So if you're able to distill that information and take what you want, that documentation will change your path. It will strengthen you, it will sharpen your focus, and you will understand what the road is ahead in terms of what you need to do. That's very important. So, until the next talk, thank you for listening to me. I hope it's been interesting, but it's more because of the man, not because of what I do. So it's about Nijinsky. I'm just a small little vehicle. If any of you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. That's my email address. Write me. It's a very simple thing. Yeah? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, sir, for providing us so much insights. And we all lead an artistic life, and it's very important to understand for our own sanity and for improving and getting better in the future. So I would say it was very insightful, wasn't it, everyone? All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.
So everyone will resume back at 6 o'clock, okay? Thank you.